Welcome to Live with the Eczema Doc, brought to you by Cleanbody, where we believe that you can heal your skin from within by cleaning your body. I'm Dr. Fong, a naturopathic doctor specializing in eczema, and I'm here to guide you through the journey of understanding the root causes of your eczema so that you can finally achieve the clear, healthy skin you deserve. Each week, we combine research-backed insights, science-based strategies, and my years of clinical experience to uncover what's really triggering your eczema and how you can take control for lasting relief. Let's dive into today's episode and uncover the next step to healing your skin from within. Today, we are talking about my top 10 tips for kids' eczema. And this is really important because most of the time we want to think about, what supplement should I give my child? What medication should my child take to address the eczema? But I would like to really start here. And this is where we start with our patients is the top 10 tips for lifestyle and nutrition changes. And often when we make these changes, we don't need medications and supplements, or we just don't need as many of them, or we don't need them at all. So Tori and I are going to be talking about this today. Tori is a Cleanbody practitioner and eczema expert, and we together make up the Cleanbody team. And we're going to talk about these top 10 tips that we're recommending for you to get started on if you have a child with eczema. If you are an adult with eczema, these tips also apply to you too, but we are going to kind of gear it towards the parents with the children who have eczema. But the same tips go for adults too. They just might apply a little bit differently. And, this is where we really like to start. And when we start here, we do notice that our patients get better faster. And sometimes we do not need as many supplements. Sometimes we don't need any supplements at all. And we're able to also see patients that are able to come off their medications and heal from the inside out. So our agenda today, we're going to talk about the root causes of eczema and the Cleanbody method really quick. And then we're going to get into those top 10 tips. And then we would love to hear your questions. We want to answer all of them today. We want to make sure that you are really understanding how to put these tips really into action in your lives so that you can really start to see the changes in your child's skin. So at Cleanbody, we like to really get to the root cause of the eczema so that it can heal for good. So to truly heal eczema and achieve lasting eczema relief, you really must address these root causes. And often conventional medication is only addressing those symptoms. So when we address the root causes, often that starts in your life, okay? So your lifestyle, your nutrition. And for kids, this is so, so important. We're going to break down all the different ways this is so important and how we might be contributing to that eczema. And sometimes these can actually be at the cause, at the root of the eczema of our children. Okay, so these conventional meds cannot cure eczema. If you want to learn a little bit more about this, we did this for our last podcast. So you can check that out at Live with the Eczema Doc, and that's episode 20. And we really like to, at Cleanbody, we need to do a very thorough evaluation, and then we need to optimize what we call the pillars of health. And that's really what we're going to be talking about today. The pillars of health are eating clean food, having a clean environment, having a clean fitness regimen, having a clean routine, and having a clean mind. Those are the pillars of health. And that's really where we like to start before we do support, such as supplements and treatments and things like that. And so today we're really going to be breaking that down because when we talk about our tips, these are things you can do at home. These are things that you can do in your lifestyle and your nutrition for your child and hopefully for the whole family as well, that everyone gets on board and does all of these top 10 tips and you will start seeing changes. Now, the first most important thing is that you keep a journal. And if you're going to go ahead and start all of this, you need to keep a journal. So Tori, at Cleanbody, we have a journaling app and we like to have people journal a number of items which really help us to see the picture. It also also helps the patient to see the picture too and really see what might be contributing to the problems. So, Tori, what do we really like to see in these journals?
Yeah, the journaling is so important because it's, first of all, how we get to know you or your child really well. So we want to see food that they're eating, and that's, day to day snacks. If you happen to have a family barbecue or a wedding, we want to see pictures of the food. So that's really important. And we want to see pictures of the skin, and ideally in the same lighting and the same angles if possible. So we want to track that over time. Even if you think the skin looks the same every week, oh, it just looks the same week. We want to see, so we can evaluate that. And then we also take pictures and have people take pictures of bowel movement. So we can actually tell a lot by what the stool looks like, the color, the consistency, if it sinks, if it floats. It actually matters a lot, and the frequency of how often those bowel movements are happening. So if that's happening every other day and you feel like that's normal for your child, that's not what we want. We actually want daily bowel movements. And in addition, we love if you just journal feelings, mood, tantrums, things that change. If you notice, my child seems more fatigued, or detail. So instead of just a picture of the skin, maybe you say, today it feels hot. It feels like there's heat coming off the skin, or it looks oozy. It's hard to tell in the photo. Those clues can help. And that's for adults too. Just letting us know kind of how you're feeling. And if you're not working with us yet, just start doing this for yourself so that you can start putting puzzle pieces together and can start to correlate how you're feeling. You can look back at food you've eaten, maybe exercise you have or haven't gotten, those kinds of things. So it's really just about data, collecting data.
Now, we do this in our practice, but this is something that you can do on your own.
Mm-hmm.
And if you actually book an eczema evaluation with us, you actually will get access to the journaling system that we use, and you can actually start using that on your own. But if you're not going to do that, then you can just grab a pen and paper or do it in your phone. And there are apps out there where you can actually get those for free and just track your symptoms. But it's important to see, okay, my child ate this meal and then all of a sudden the symptoms flared. Or we use this cream or this lotion or this ointment and then the symptoms flared. Or we use this soap. Or I was super stressed, or, the baby threw a tantrum and then all of a sudden the eczema flared. So all of these things are really important to watch and see, because then you can start seeing, okay, what are those biggest factors that are involved in the lifestyle and the nutrition that might be playing a role. And I think the most common ones that we'll see, like Tori will look at the meals. And Tori, what's the most common thing you see with kids that we're going to talk about in another tip? But what would be the most common thing you see with kids that you want to change, right at the get-go?
Oh, processed food for sure. I think that's a big one. Snacks that are just highly processed, not enough whole foods, not enough fruits and veggies, not getting enough protein in. So there's a lot of areas, especially with kid food. If you're feeding your kids just like that typical marketed kid food, that needs to change like right away. And you will probably notice a huge impact almost immediately within days if you start to change that.
And some parents will even be doing, gluten-free, dairy-free, etc., but it's still packaged food.
Yep.
And that is still not what's best for your child's skin. And we're going to talk about that in one of our next tips. For me, what I really like to look at is the skin and what does the pattern look like? Does it look like a continent on the skin? Does it look like, is it all over? Is it in certain areas? That tells me a little bit about what we might be dealing with. And then the poops help me a lot. So you want to see like a nice log, a nice brown log. And some things that I might see with kids are, it's not a log, it's little pebbles. They're not having poops every day. I see that maybe their poop is like a light color or like a clay color. All of these things really give me clues. And then when I get those clues, that's how we then start to build the treatment and how we get to say, okay, like we're going to address this and then we're going to watch it get better. Okay. So it's really important. Keep a journal if you are, number one on the top tips. And then everything else after that, if you're journaling correctly, then you'll be able to see how there will be changes when you make these changes. Okay. Yep. Number 2 on our top 10 list, swap processed snacks for whole fiber-rich, colorful foods. Tori, tell us about this.
Yeah, so you just mentioned, even if it's, all the free, gluten-free, dairy-free, all the frees, if it's packaged, it's not ideal. So we want, to get rid of those refined sugars, the seed oils, any additives, preservatives, food dyes, any of those things. Empty foods. We want to make sure we're choosing foods that are whole foods from the earth or from an animal. And that's just super important to reduce inflammation and to get all those colors in those plant-based foods. We need all of those colors. And you can have reactions and sensitivities. There can be all of those aspects, but there's problems with the gut lining that can occur from eating these highly processed foods. You can have histamine issues. So there can be many components to it. And I would say that this is a big problem that we see, especially with kids, is that, maybe at the meals they're eating some decent foods, but they're snacking on like granola bars and Cheerios and Goldfish and those kinds of things that are convenient and easy. And we certainly understand that sometimes it feels like that's, the easiest thing to do, but we can help with that if you work with us for sure, and how to get set up to have healthy snacks that are quick and convenient. But swapping these out completely for whole foods is going to make such an impact in the skin.
And, patients will say, or parents will say, well, there's really good ingredients in here. There's just, this, and this. And although those might be good ingredients, there's a couple of things to think about. When a food is processed, it actually goes through a processing that includes having exposures to potentially metals and plastics in the processing process that tend to leak into the foods. So the processed foods may have these extra toxins that, a whole food may not have. And then the other thing is most processed foods, most things that come in a box or a bag are actually going to contain sugar or have or be high carb, right? So like you think your crackers, your chips, those types of things. And for an eczema person, often there's what we call a dysbiosis, or an imbalance in the microbiome. And this imbalance gets fed by all of these carbohydrates that are especially the processed kind that might not be fiber rich. And they're really just kind of feeding these bugs. And so, swapping these processed snacks is like number one, because when we see our kids, this is like the number one thing we see is that everything is packaged. Like the whole lunch is all stuff that they have to open up, right? And we want whole food, and everybody on this planet should be eating whole food if possible. Okay, especially our kids. We want to start them off right. In 2025, there was a study that said a processed food and snack dietary pattern was associated with worse eczema severity, more itching, and distinct gut microbiota signatures. So, we see this in the literature. And if you want to see these studies, definitely check out our blog at cleanbody.health/blog, because we wrote a blog on these top 10 tips, and you'll be able to see all the associated studies that we're going to be talking about today. Okay. Now, number 3, we take out those processed foods, but what do we put in place of those foods? So we want to really focus on those gut healing foods, because eczema has such a root cause based in the gut and those imbalances in the gut. And so, Tori, tell us about these gut healing foods.
Yeah, so I think the easiest way, first to start, is the rainbow. So we call it rainbow plates at Cleanbody, but just shopping the perimeter and looking for as many colors as possible. It can actually be pretty fun for kids to just try to get rainbow foods on their plate and make it fun. Like how many different colors can you get for dinner? And pick out different fruits and veggies that maybe aren't typical for your house so that you can kind of mix it up. But all of those colors have different polyphenols and flavonoids and all kinds of antioxidants that are wonderful for the gut lining and help heal and seal the gut. And so that's huge. And those foods also have a lot of fiber. So that's the next one, is boosting fiber, which you're going to be doing automatically if you increase those colorful foods. But you can also add things like chia seeds or flax seeds. those are great to add to like smoothies, but that also helps keep the bowels moving. And what we find a lot of times, especially when you start with number one, which is the journal entries, is people will find that itchiness and rashes increase when there's more constipation. And so keeping that fiber really high keeps the bowels moving, which is what we want to do. And then fermented foods can be great too, because they have those natural probiotics. And I will say that not everyone's ready for these at the beginning. So you can try this. If you feel like there's a reaction, maybe there's a digestive response, then just kind of put those on the back burner until later on, because sometimes your gut needs a little bit more healing before you can bring these in. But if you tolerate these well, like yogurt and sauerkraut and kimchi, include those because they're really great to add in natural probiotics. So, and then of course, just removing again, anything triggering to that gut lining, inflammatory foods, any allergens or sensitivities that you know your child has. Sugar is always going to be a culprit here. And then of course, additives like food dyes and those kinds of things.
Yeah. And in 2023, the BMC public health study showed that frequent intake of whole plant-based foods is associated with milder eczema. So again, we're seeing this in the literature. This is not just our clinical experience, but we are seeing this whole foods. So if you just kind of think for your child, don't feed them anything out of a box, anything out of a bag. And of course, we can't always be 100% on this, but I think if we lean more towards the whole foods, there's going to be a big difference. Now, why is that? Well, not only are these whole foods going to heal the gut, but they are nutrients for the skin to heal. They are nutrients for the immune system to stabilize. So there's these are basically your multivitamin, right? Is in the rainbow. So you want to add those colorful vegetables. So a tip from me is that get your children involved, have them find the rainbow foods like, ooh, what are we going to do for red? What are we going to do for orange? What are we going to do for green today? And it's got to be the rainbow. Not necessarily like every single day, although that would be wonderful, but through the week, if you could get the entire rainbow, that would be great. But if you can look down on your plate and see the rainbow, that would be the best if we could possibly do that. I know with kids, that might be a little bit harder because you might want to get that, let's say, throughout your day or throughout the week. And what that might look like are like some blueberries, that's nice and blue purples. Then we have the greens like broccoli, spinach, etc. Then we have carrots, oranges and carrots and etc. So, you want to get all of those really, really bright colors onto your plate. And when you see those bright colors, you want to think, okay, those are my vitamins.
Yep.
Okay. All right. And then next, hydrate, hydrate, hydrate. Now, obviously, like if you're not drinking water and you're dehydrated, the skin is going to be dry. Right. That's a really obvious thing. But I think we don't think about this with our kids as much. They need to be drinking at least half their weight in ounces of water. So if you take their weight, let's say they weigh 50 pounds, they should be drinking at least 25 ounces of water daily, and more if they're running around sweating, etc. And then another way to really look at this is to take the urine color test, and just you can see if you guys are looking at this. There's colors. If you're really hydrated, that urine's going to be maybe like a light yellow to a clear yellow. And then if you're dehydrated, it's going to get darker and darker and darker. And if it's dark like brown, you need to go see a doctor. But you're severely hydrated if it's like a really kind of like mustardy dark yellow. And so you want to look at your child's urine. Okay. And keeping the skin barrier really supple, it requires water.
Yeah.
And not only that, but the water also is important for having really nice bowel movement. So sometimes when kids are constipated and we just say, hey, increase the water intake, we see that those bowel movements increase. This also helps detoxification through the kidneys and the lymphatic system. And one of the big root causes of eczema is toxic burden. So by flushing our systems out, we're also helping out that eczema. And then there also is dehydration induced inflammation. And, water is really important because a lot of times our kids are drinking very sugary drinks. And we just recommend water. If you could just do water, that would be great because our fruit juices are really high in sugar. So you might be thinking, oh, okay, great. We're going to get our orange in an orange juice. Tori, what do we say usually about naked carbs here?
Yeah, naked carbs. No carb without a protein buddy, first of all. And second of all, especially with the juices, in theory, it sounds great, but you're not getting any of that great fiber with that when you have a juice that way. And so it can actually be dehydrating because you're just getting so much sugar. And so you're actually dehydrating yourself. You're going to pull more water out of the system, especially as that juice makes its way through and makes your little one have to use the restroom. So not ideal. And so a little bit, on special occasions, we understand is okay, but your day-to-day, it should be water. If your child is thirsty, give them water. And give them a water bottle. They don't need juice. They don't need soda. They don't need any of that stuff because it actually can be detrimental. And then, of course, if you're like Dr. Fong said, if they're sweating and exercise, you need to increase. But I do want to say you can't overhydrate. So when we say hydrate, we just mean the amount that's needed. So please know, be careful with that too. You don't have to over push it, but we do want you to get at least that minimum at the half the body weight in ounces.
A 2022 review in the Journal of Children examining atopic dermatitis, which is eczema, suggests that for individuals, including children with low fluid intake, increasing water consumption may hydrate the skin and help support the skin barrier. So again, in the literature, we need to drink water. And all of these things sound really basic, but I feel like that's not what our pediatricians tell us when we bring our child in for eczema. Our pediatricians say, okay, here's this cream, right? And they don't tell us about all these really basic things that we just should be doing. And there should be more education there. And I wouldn't say that's all pediatricians, but many pediatricians, are not trained in nutrition and trained in these things. So they're just kind of giving us medications for our child. All right, number 5 on our top 10 tips, clean up bath, body, and home products. Now, this can be really, really important because our number 2 root cause after gut imbalances is toxic burden. And we have so many, unfortunately, in our homes, so many toxic things that can be in our homes. And I think a lot of times the baby products are less toxic, but even those can have fragrance in them. So we want to choose cleansers with no fragrance, especially for an eczema kid. And often pediatricians are educating you on this. Moisturizers that are also fragrance-free, paraben-free, etc. And then make sure your household cleaners are also natural and toxin-free. Because all of these can really trigger the eczema by putting a burden on the liver and the kidney and all these detox pathways. And a 2017 study in environmental health used time series analysis of children's urinary phthalate and BPA levels. Those come from plastics. Phthalates also come from fragrances. So these fragrances that we even just have, like the fragrance in our car, our car fresheners, those can be quite toxic. And they found that higher exposure to these chemicals correlates with worsening eczema symptoms, okay? So we really need to pay attention to what we're using. We love a couple of resources. So we have a product recommendations page. If you go to cleanbody.health/products, these are products that have been Cleanbody approved by our team. And then we love ewg.org. This is a wonderful resource. If you're going to buy any any product, go here first, look it up, look up to see if that product is toxic. If you are a mom who's breastfeeding your child, you want to think about your toxins because they are also leaking into your breast milk if you're breastfeeding your baby. So think about your perfume, most common perfumes. Are you wearing perfume? Is dad wearing perfume? Cologne? These are things that I have seen to trigger my patients. Let's see, what else is most common? Like your laundry detergent having fragrance, maybe your hand soap having fragrance. Tori, what would you say would you see is the most common in your clients?
I was going to say perfumes, but I also think plastic. I think there's plastic everywhere, and it's hard to avoid, especially when you just start trying to make yourself aware of all of the exposures. But packaged food, of course, even frozen food, it's always in plastic. People are heating things in plastic. Please do not ever put plastic in the microwave with food in it and feed it to your children. And toys, like there are toys that are plastic and then they're getting put in children's mouths. So that's a huge culprit. So anywhere you can eliminate or reduce plastic, how you store your food, even if the lid is plastic and not just the container, because I know that happens a lot that people get glass containers, but the lid is still plastic. So all the plastic exposure, I think BPA shows up a decent amount of time when we test as well.
Yeah, we do run these tests on the children. We can collect the urine and see these excrete into the urine because the kidney is what metabolizes and detoxes these. And so we see these in the urine of a lot of our eczema kids. And we find both phthalates and BPA among other toxins as well. And this is a test we can actually do on babies too. So we can see this, and sometimes it's their own exposures, but it can also be mom's exposures again if mom is breastfeeding. All right, number 6, we need to support detox through daily movement. A 1994 study suggests that participating in regular group sports programs can help normalize skin vascular responses in people with atopic eczema, potentially providing therapeutic benefits. So, getting that blood moving, getting that circulation moving actually brings nutrients to the skin and carries away the toxins. It helps elimination through helping to eliminate the toxins that are stuck in the lymph system. And so important. And unfortunately, Tori and I probably are in the age range where we used to play outside when we were
all
kids.
The time. Yeah.
And like parents would be like, all right, bye. And you would go out, you would play. Nobody was afraid. Everyone was outside. Everyone was in the dirt, getting dirty and picking up microbes, by the way, good ones in the dirt. And nowadays, you look at the kids, no one's playing outside. Everybody is on their computer, their telephone, their iPad, and kids are indoors. And this is like one of the biggest issues, I think, as to why we're seeing eczema rise over time. And one of those things is actually getting out. And as these children are playing in the dirt, like we need to start doing that at the get-go, because you're actually picking up good microbes there. And that actually helps with that first root cause is the gut imbalances. Yeah. Second, you're outside, you're getting sunshine, and then you're moving the body too. Okay, so all of these things are important. And Tori, would you agree? Do you see this? I mean, like, were you also in the generation that like we went out and we played?
Yeah, nobody knew where you were, and you just came back like when the street lights went on. It's time to head home, and it's a different era for sure, but it is so important to be outside. So the movement is one part of it, but the outside movement is the other part. And so we do see vitamin D low in a lot of our kids and at Cleanbody. And a lot of that is because they're not in the sun, like they're just not getting sunshine. And I understand that Sometimes when people come to us, the skin is in such bad condition that maybe the sun is painful or sweating is painful or even movement is painful. And so if that's where you're at or your child is at, there are gentle ways to get started. So please don't just discard that and say, well, we can't do that right now. You can do yoga moves and stretching, and you can do gentle walks. You can do a 5-minute walk around the block instead of, an hour play session at the playground. So there are ways to kind of introduce it slowly if needed, but be outside, and then you get those negative ions from the earth, and that is a grounding. So that's really important too. So there's just countless benefits that you're getting by playing outside and just being a kid. A lot of our toddlers and things, I don't think we have as many issues with here because they kind of constantly are on the run. It's like more as kids get into that elementary and middle school age that I feel like we start to see less movement get less over time.
Yeah, absolutely. So, have those activities that you do with your kids, have them be outside, have them be moving their bodies. Instead of, let's say, watching a movie or something like that, because this can actually make a big difference.
Yeah.
All right. Number 7, focus on calm and sleep. Now, if you're an eczema parent, you know that when your kid starts to get anxious or, angry, that eczema comes out. So calm is so, so, so important. And I would say that this starts with you, parents. You also have to be calm because they are just modeling after you, right? So if you're getting stressed out and you are dealing with your stress in a certain way, they are modeling after you. And stress increases inflammation, it increases itching, and it also will affect how they're sleeping. So we need to make sure that throughout the day, they're nice and calm. But then we also need to make sure that they are getting that restful sleep. And unfortunately, as this 2019 study found, kids with eczema have significantly poor sleep quality. And this, unfortunately, is a cycle. Their sleep quality is poor, likely because they're super itchy, but then it contributes to their worsening symptoms as well. So we really need to work on this. So, having that consistency at bedtime, a bath, the moisturizer, the story, the lights out, having that space be really cool, really cold, actually, because when we get hot and we have eczema, that makes us itchy. Having breathable sheets, make sure to trim the nails of your little ones. Unplug early, no screens before bed, 30 to 60 minutes. I would say definitely 60 minutes before bed. No screens. And I need you to practice some calm down tools. So Tori, what kind of calm down tools do we typically recommend to the kids in our practice?
Yeah, one of my favorite is, lay your child down and put like a stuffed animal on their belly or their chest and have them try to make that go up and down with really slow, deep breathing. So that can be something that they can see and understand. That's a really great one. You can do kids meditation. There's great apps out there where you can get into meditation or prayer. If your family prays, you can do that together. So anything that gets the nervous system in a quiet place and you're out of that fight or flight is what we're looking for. Some people do gratitude. Maybe they talk about their day and might say, what are 3 things we can be grateful for today? And you can ask your child to think about those things and to list those things. And maybe even it's about their own body. If they're struggling with eczema, they can talk about other things about their body that they're grateful for to kind of change the mindset a little bit. So it's really just about resetting and reframing and calming down before rest. And a lot of times I think when you're in a cycle of knowing that nighttime is hard for eczema, mom and dad get a little nervous, and then the child gets a little nervous about bedtime, like anticipating that itch is going to come on. So it's really important to try to reframe so that you're not kind of bringing it on with that anxiety.
Absolutely. Like I said, it starts with you, parents. You have to create that calm environment for your child. So slow it down. You take some nice deep breaths. I love the 4-7-8 breath, breathing in for 4, holding for 7, and releasing for 8. And get yourself there before connecting with your child so that your child sees, okay, everything's okay. I'm safe. It's okay. And I love doing a lymphatic drainage massage before bed. If you're doing your moisturizing, for your child, that's a nice time to just kind of use slow, gentle strokes, make it this bonding ritual, make it this routine. Okay, we know it's time for bed. Maybe you're playing some music, maybe you're singing a bedtime song, have that routine because that's something that your child can hold on to so that they aren't thinking about, the itchy skin.
Yeah.
And sometimes there are things that we could use, supplements that we could use to support sleep as well. But we have to start here. Like if you aren't doing all these things we just said, we have to start here. We don't ever start with supplements, if these things aren't getting done. All right. And then number 8 is to use healing topicals. Often we're given topical steroids. These offer really fast relief, but they don't fix the problem. And the unfortunate thing is Tori and I see a lot of patients come into our practice with topical steroid withdrawal. And this is where you've been using, topical steroids for a long period of time. And now they either stop working, you have to use a stronger topical steroid, or you're now getting this kind of red, burning, oozing sensation. And that's called TSW, or topical steroid withdrawal. And unfortunately, Tori and I are seeing more and more kids coming into our practice with this problem. So we would recommend, working with someone like ourselves, or, a naturopathic or integrative doctor, who can really address the root cause. Because if you've been using topical steroids, you can't just come off of them necessarily and think, oh, okay, and I'm just gonna, do all these tips and everything's gonna be okay. We do potentially, if you're already in TSW, we have to support that system so that system can come down nicely. Like it's being supported right now by the topical steroids. So we have to make sure that we're doing something to kind of, offset that. And then what are we going to choose instead? Well, we need to really know the skin. So if there is yeast on the skin, and there is a yeast called Malassezia, and we did a podcast episode on this 2 episodes ago, so I think that was episode 19, we need to potentially not use certain oils, okay? Because those oils can feed the Malassezia. If we have staph overgrowth, we might want to use certain things like hypochlorous acid. We have a product at Cleanbody called Clean Skin Calm that's hypochlorous acid. That's a great one potentially for staph. Or we might want to use topicals that will address both the yeast and the staph, okay? So we need to think about this, but unfortunately, you can't just go out there and use any topical and think it's going to work, because we also need to know, okay, what are the root factors here? Is there a yeast overgrowth? Is there a bacterial overgrowth? A yeast overgrowth sometimes looks like a little continent on the skin. And so that might clue you in, like, oh, this might be yeast. Maybe, I shouldn't be using shea butter, because that will feed the Malassezia. And I think working with someone just makes this so much easier, because now you might be all confused, like, oh no, are the topicals I'm using feeding this or not? And it's hard for you to figure this out, because you're just kind of in it. So it's really helpful to have people to look into this for you. A 2017 review in the Journal of Clinical Medicine states that regular use of emollients improves skin barrier function, reduces inflammation, and lowers the risk of eczema flares, and supports the use of non-steroidal barrier repairing topicals. So there's a lot out there. And I would say, you can do a little bit of trial and error. If you notice that you put the ointment on your child and then your child scratches more, that might be a no-no. We don't want to use that. And again, if you see this like continents on the skin, you might not want to use things like shea butter, etc. And you can go to cleanbody.health/eczema relief tools, and you'll see that we have a fungal guide. So that can kind of help you to determine, do I have a yeast or fungal issue? And then the oils that are okay and the oils that are not okay are in that guide. So that's something you can also look into. Okay. Number 9 is use clean water. Tori, tell us what this means. What is clean water? Why is this so important?
Clean water. So you have to think water you ingest, but also water that touches your skin. So it's all the water. So water that your child is bathing in or showering in, and water that's being ingested. And so it would come from a couple of different angles there. But first of all, if you're drinking tap water, there are so many things in tap water, and you can actually look into that. There's websites out there that you can kind of look up your zip code and see what contaminants are in tap water. But so from an ingesting standpoint, that's adding to that toxin load that we have already kind of briefly discussed. So we want to make sure the water that you're drinking is very clean. And if you use something like a filter, which we do have linked, if you look at the slide, it's cleanbody.health/filters. You'll find some that we really like. It's important that if you're using reverse osmosis, that we remineralize that water. So that's another aspect as well. And then when it comes to water that touches our skin, if the skin is irritated, inflamed, oozing, broken, having those toxins in the water is going to be problematic as well. So it's really important. I think that's an area that a lot of people miss. They might be drinking really great water, and then we're like, what are they bathing in? They're just bathing in the typical tap water. So get a shower filter, get a bath filter for the water that touches the skin, so that you know that there are no contaminants that are affecting the eczema from an internal or external perspective.
Yeah. And that website that Tori was talking about, if you go to cleanbody.health/filters, there is a link to the EWG website. That's basically a tap water database where you can look up your zip code, and it will tell you what contaminants are in your water. And it will also tell you what potential filters you should be using for all the contaminants. And the most filtration happens from a reverse osmosis filter. And as Tori mentioned, you have to remineralize that because it's actually taking everything out, good and bad. Yeah. And then you remineralize that water. And then, you're not going to necessarily be able to get that level on your shower water or your drinking water if you're putting them directly on those sources. So you could, let's say, get like a reverse osmosis system for the whole house, make sure you're remineralizing that. And then sometimes we also recommend getting another filter right on the shower head and right on the sink head, and for the drinking water, just because even if you're doing a whole house filter, all that water is still running through all the pipes in your house, and then it could be picking up other toxins. So we recommend lots of filtration all the way around. And so checking out cleanbody.health/filters, and a 2000 study in atopic dermatitis showed that atopic dermatitis patients or eczema patients, it showed that free residual chlorine in bath water significantly reduces the skin's water holding capacity. And that's really important for people with eczema because we need to hold in all that moisture. If we get dry, that's problematic. So we need to make sure that barrier of our skin is super, super strong. Okay. So this is actually a really important one, super easy in my opinion. Even if you don't get the whole house filter, just buy a $70, it's like a $70 filter for your shower. And you also maybe want to buy a filter for your sink. I want all the water sources touching your child to be clean water. Okay. And then remember that after you bathe your child, just immediately moisturize. If you're doing no moisture treatment, which is a type of treatment for people with TSW, then you can ignore this. But otherwise, you do want to trap in that moisture, and you don't want to wait longer than 2 to 3 minutes. So get out of that shower and put that moisture on whatever you are using to moisturize the skin. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Number 10. So we got the water that touches our body. Yep. We've talked about the food that goes in our mouth. And next we need to talk about the air. Okay. So basically what we're trying to do here is make sure that everything that we are living in, our life is just as clean as possible. So kids with eczema are more sensitive to airborne irritants like VOCs and mold and pollutants. nutrients. And this poor air quality can really activate the immune system, histamine release, which causes allergy type symptoms, oxidative stress, and then flare ups. So we recommend air purifiers in the homes, but we also recommend opening those windows like every day if you can, even during the winter, and getting that airflow in. And that's why our homes are so toxic, is just it's always closed space, so that air isn't flowing. So if you open those windows, you're going to get that airflow. Reduce or do not use, if I would say, avoid completely synthetic fragrances.
Yeah.
So perfumes, colognes, in all of your products, if it says fragrance, remove it. Essential oil type fragrances are okay. So if you want to do, like an essential oil for like a lavender oil or something like that, that's okay, but no synthetic fragrances.
Mm-hmm.
Also, for eczema people, sometimes the humidity can be really important. Maybe we don't want it too humid. We don't want it so dry as well. So somewhere in the middle, like at 50% is usually good, 50 to 55. If you go higher than that, like when you reach like 65, etc., and higher, you might be actually having mold growth in the home if it's too humid. And then you want to also vacuum pretty frequently for those with eczema, and hopefully your vacuum has a HEPA filter so that you're also cleaning up there. A Korean study of 150 children with atopic dermatitis found that higher indoor levels of VOCs were significantly associated with worse eczema symptoms. So we need that clean air. And I would say if you can't afford an air purifier right now, or that's not something you want to get, then just open those windows.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a really important thing. If you're cooking in the home,
Yeah.
make sure you are opening the windows while you're cooking, because that's one of the ways that air gets really toxic too, is when we cook. Tori, anything else to add here? And then before I move on to Tori, we also have recommendations here. So cleanbody.health/filters, and you can see not only our water filters but our air filters as well too. And Tori, do you have anything else to add here?
Yeah, I would say also, if you're, prioritizing, like, let's say your house is however many thousand square feet, and maybe you can't do the whole house. Maybe it's just your child's room. And I would say, especially if there's like pets and there's dander in the house, that's a big one. So make the room that your child sleeps in, because they're going to spend the most time there, very sacred. And so keep the door shut, keep that air purifier going in there, maybe keep pets out of that room, so that area stays really clean. And that goes with dust as well. Just keep it cleaner, just to keep the air a little bit cleaner in that special spot.
All right. So those are our top 10 tips. And if you truly work through these top 10 tips, you truly should see a change in your child's eczema. Now, I'm not promising it's going to be 100%. In our practice, we see that the change when doing lifestyle and nutrition changes could be 100%,
Yeah.
or it could be lower. It could be 50%, 25%. It depends on what that root cause is. But I want you to go through this checklist and just make sure you have everything checked off here, because then at least you're checking off a whole bunch of things that, we would normally do. And if your child still has symptoms, then I would recommend working with a practitioner, because then it might not be enough. We might find that your child has mold toxicity or heavy metal toxicity or a parasite or a gut bug or a yeast overgrowth, and we need to do something additional. So at Cleanbody, this is our second step. After we evaluate and do testing, we really hone in on the lifestyle and nutrition changes. And then as we're waiting for those labs to come in, and then finally, we've worked on those lifestyle nutrition changes. We see the improvement there. Maybe there's 25 to 50% left. Now we work on giving supplements. Okay. But I think that in our world, in our society, we are always jumping to what medication can we take, what supplement can we take, and a pill to solve our problems. And, as parents, we might need to accept that it might actually be something we've been doing that we just didn't know was a problem, right? So hopefully you'll take these tips and make some changes. And if you want our guide basically breaks all of this down as well. And it's It's called the Eczema Doc's Guide to Kids Eczema. Discover the root causes of your child's eczema and how to start healing from within. Go to cleanbody.health/eczema tools. That's cleanbody.health/eczema tools. And you'll see all of our guides there. And we also have a fungal guide as well, too. So you might want to download that one also. I had some questions on my story when I asked if anyone had questions that they wanted me to answer live. So I'm going to answer those now. So someone asked, does anyone simply grow out of having eczema? And I would say there's kind of two answers here. So one is, it is possible for someone to grow out of eczema. And one of the reasons for that is that when children are born, they actually have really weak skin barriers. And as they age, they actually get more of what we call natural moisturizing factors. And those actually come around 6 to 12 months. And so maybe you might have a baby or an infant with eczema. And as they grow and their skin gets stronger, you might actually see that the eczema goes away. And so that's one way where you might grow out of eczema. But the other thing that can sometimes happen is maybe the eczema goes away, but you might be left with gut issues or headaches or other symptoms. And eczema was maybe just that first, like I like to call symptoms alarm systems. And maybe eczema was just that first alarm system to go off. And then you just keep going with whatever you're doing. You're what we call a SAD lifestyle, SAD nutrition, standard American diet, right? You're still eating packaged foods, sugar, etc. And now maybe the eczema has gone away, but it's changed into gut issues and now you're super constipated. And then maybe it changes into hormonal issues or headaches as you age and you don't have the eczema anymore, but that was just that first signal and you're not really listening. And so you're having more and more and more symptoms. I would see for me, that's more common that I see that.
Yeah.
I might be seeing someone for, let's say, like a thyroid condition, and they tell me their story and they say, oh, well, when I was a child, I had eczema. Then after that, I used to get like really constipated. Then I had headaches. And then now they have an autoimmune thyroid issue, so the root cause was not addressed. And so it just morphed into different types of symptoms. Tori, do you have an answer here?
Yeah, I would say the same thing. And to add to what you said, I think sometimes we see people that maybe they seemingly grew out of it. Maybe they had it in childhood and then they didn't have it for a lot of years, but all of a sudden now as an adult, it's come back, or like in their 20s or like in college. So because it is an alarm system, a lot of times we'll see that when that liver gets burdened or something else happens, maybe you take a few rounds of antibiotics and it throws off the gut microbiome, then all of a sudden it shows back up again. So there can be like a genetic component where you have like a susceptibility towards eczema. But a lot of times when your system is burdened is when you'll see it kind of pop its head back out again. So we really want to make sure you get to that root and it's not just shutting it down, because we don't want it to come back, years later or months later. So, like I said, it can be any of those scenarios. You can grow out of it. It can morph, or it can kind of be there and then leave and then come back.
Yeah. All right. And then the next question is what to do when eczema becomes impetigo. And so for those of you who don't know what impetigo is, this is when there's a skin infection, a bacterial skin infection on the skin. And this can be because you're scratching and you cause an infection there. If this happens, you need to use antibacterial. You could use natural products first if you would like to try that. And those might include, and of course you want to consult with your doctor, but those might include things like hypochlorous acid. It might include colloidal silver. It might include grapefruit seed extract. So we do have topicals that are antibacterial that you could potentially use, but I wouldn't recommend necessarily doing this on your own. I would recommend working with a naturopathic doctor, integrative doctor. And you might want to also take some oral, either antibacterials or immune support, because this is an infection, right? Just like if you're having a cold or a viral infection, you need to support your immune system. So same thing. And if you don't get it under control, the way that this is treated is with topical antibiotics and then oral antibiotics. Now, at all costs, I like to really try to avoid oral antibiotics if possible, even topical antibiotics, because it can change the microbiome of your skin. So, in my practice, I like to say, okay, if you're working with me, let's try natural products first. And if then that doesn't cut it, then we may need to go to the conventional antibiotics. And then we have to do some backup there. We need to make sure that we are doing probiotics to repopulate the gut, because unfortunately, when you take antibiotics, it's like a broad spectrum, like let's kill everything, good and bad. And then your body actually needs to repopulate those organisms. And it can take a while for that to happen. And sometimes there have been studies that show up to 2 months it might take. But even in that 2-month mark, you're not at 100%. You're still only like 80% back to where you were. And sometimes you never even get back to your 100%, depending on what you're eating and your diet and all of that. Tori, do you have anything else to share there about the antibiotics and what we can do even to repopulate?
Yeah, and I've actually seen research even up to a couple of years to get back to that baseline for the microbiome when you take antibiotics. So when you think about baseline, most people's baseline isn't that great to begin with. And so if you have to take multiple rounds, that can really put a dent in that microbiome. So not to scare anyone, if you need antibiotics, it's not the end of the world. Like, we can definitely support the gut and get things healthier, but we need to be intentional about it. And I think that's the key, is just that gut healing food, like we talked about earlier, getting those probiotic rich foods. And sometimes we actually use a supplement, like a probiotic supplement, to help with that too.
Thank you for joining live with the Eczema Doc. I hope today's episode provided you with valuable insights and tools to support your journey to healing your skin from within. For more information, visit www.cleanbody.health or check the links in the podcast description. You'll find the studies and resources discussed today on my blog. You can also take my free eczema root cause assessment to uncover potential triggers, or download my free eczema relief guide for quick, practical tips to calm flare-ups and help with your sleep. If you found this episode helpful, please remember to like, subscribe, and share the podcast to help others on their healing journey. And if you'd like to stay updated with future episodes, please turn on your notifications so you don't miss a thing. Please remember, this podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. Always consult with your healthcare provider or book a consultation with me before making any changes to your healthcare regimen. Use the code LIVE30 to enjoy 30% off as a thank you for tuning in. When you clean your body, you heal your skin from within. Thank you again for listening, and I'll see you next week.